Okie doke. Well, welcome to episode 6 of Going South. It's a rainy day in the deep South and it's cold. I'm excited to talk to a dear friend of mine, Angie Tillman. I have known Angie 20 years,
Try
30,
close to 30.
30
We'll
years.
be, Chuck and I will be married 27 in March.
Yeah, she's the wife of a really dear friend of mine, and I've nothing but respect for and loved her ever since I met her. She has a bachelor's degree in middle school education, a master's degree in middle school science education, and she just got another master's degree in kind of specialist degree in terms of teacher leadership. So
Yes.
she's just wrapped that up. She has taught in public school. Well, she's taught, done education for 24 years and taught in public schools for 22 of those 24 years. So she's a seasoned teacher in a rural county in South Georgia. She knows the lay of the land. She's from that county. And over the years, one of the things that Angie feels like my sister to me. She's a intellectual giant, a woman of science. She's a thinker, critical thinker. She's grappling with all the big questions. So we've always had these really great conversations with one another, particularly as another Southerner. And I wanted to just chat with her today about kind of living in the South, what that means as someone who's not necessarily a hardcore conservative. What does it mean to be a woman that's not a hardcore conservative in the South? So hopefully we'll talk about that a little bit today. Did I get anything wrong, Angie? And thank you for doing this today. I really
No, I love the compliments.
Well, it's true. You and your mom, and I've talked to Angie about having her mom on. Her mom's another giant, and I guess your mom identifies as a Democrat, right?
Yes.
Yeah, her mother has a local business where a lot of conservative, outspoken Republican men come in, and I've been in that business with her when there's been political discussions, and she holds her own, and it's an amazing thing to see, particularly again in a place that's really conservative. So, I guess Angie, do you consider yourself a liberal? Because I imagine you're conservative on some issues and liberal on others. If I'm just guessing. Is that fair?
Yes. Yeah. I'm not a hardcore liberal. I'm not out there marching the protest.
Yeah.
I do have some conservative values on some things.
Yeah.
I think liberalism appeals to me because I sincerely believe that people should have choice in life. It shouldn't be dictated about what I say, what I can do, things like that.
Yeah.
I'm all about choice with anything.
Gotcha.
And I feel like, being a Democrat or being a liberal, that's the side that provides more choice, in my opinion, than the more conservative side.
Yeah. Well, I think folks get painted like with one brush, like liberals are all one thing, because I'm not an anti-gun guy.
Yeah, me either.
I would love to have conversations with folks who want to have assault weapons. I'd like to understand more about why folks want military grade weapons, like what's going on with that. But so I think most of us are complex. We may be conservative on some issues and liberal on others. But I guess that, and I've asked you this before, but I'd love to talk more about it. You are in a red state and a hardcore red town. How does a liberal come out of that situation?
Well, I came from my mama. Her values definitely transferred to me. Not so much my dad. My dad was more conservative. He had those typical views. He saw things black and white. I can remember one time growing up, he's made the comment that he thinks George Wallace should have been president.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. So basically, my mom and dad had opposing views, but they loved each other very much. But he was definitely Republican. And my mom, I guess just having conversations with her and spending, you know, that kind of time with her, I picked up on those values from her more than my dad. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
my dad was great. We spent a lot of time together, but you know, when he would get and speak about politics and stuff, I mean, it just kind of, I was like, really? That's how you see that?
Yeah.
You know, but he was always open to listening. I mean, of course, because he had the two women in his life, you know, had these opposing views, but he was also willing to listen as opposed to some people. But definitely I get my values from my mom.
Where do you think she got them? Because again, your mom is in her 80s, right?
Yeah.
She again grew up in a rural southern town dominated by kind of conservative viewpoints, right? Like, how did
Yeah.
that happen then?
I mean, you know, and I've talked to her about that. I'm like, how are you like this? You know, because her siblings and stuff weren't like that I know of, but I can tell you that my mom, you know, her family was not well off, and she was the youngest of six. She was the baby, and her mother, my grandmother, had Huntington's chorea, which is a genetic, you know, disease that starts showing itself like in 30s, 40s, stuff like that. You don't know that you have that, and you have a 50% chance of getting it. So by the time my mom was born and old enough to really know her mom, you know, my grandmother was in a wheelchair, you know, and mama, and then her dad was a farmer in this county, and they were poor. You know, they had to work hard. They had to work hard for everything. You know, I remember her telling me, you know, Angie, you need to save your money. I can remember, you know, I always wanted to go to the dentist, but my family didn't have money for stuff like that. So I saved all my money. And when I had enough money to go to the dentist, I went to the dentist. You know, my mom's just, that's the way she is. And so I think she saw, you know, she's seen oppression, she's lived in poverty. And so just, you know, sometimes maybe you're just born with that compassion. She hates to see other people suffer.
Gotcha.
You know, or not be able to have the same advantages as others.
Yeah.
She wants everybody to be on an equal playing field. And so, I mean, I feel the same way.
Yeah.
I hate seeing somebody having more advantages than someone else. We need to all be on the same playing field.
Yeah. Well, I guess, yeah. I guess the other part of it I wonder about is, I mean, as a woman, both you and your mom growing up in the deep South, there's kind of these defined roles for men and women. And I remember being a kid and the idea that women could do certain jobs is just laughable, like firefighter, police, or, I mean, the jobs were really gendered in a particular way. Women were teachers, men did this. I mean, were there any, you think with your mom or with you, any experiences that like fed into seeing the world differently as just as women in the South?
Well, I can, you know, thinking back with my mom, you know, now she to me was like, I wouldn't say a typical housewife, but now she was the one who uh cleaned the house, fixed the meals, you know, she cooked every night. You know, my dad
And
didn't really
she
help.
cooked. We're
Yeah.
talking a meal, right?
Yeah. I mean, like every night, you know, because my daddy didn't like leftovers, you know, I mean, he would eat it some, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, she had that kind of typical housewife life. But now she worked at manufacturing Levi's for years and years. Me growing up, I can remember, you know, her going to work and stuff, and my daddy getting me ready for school and taking me to school. You know, and he did do stuff like that. But you know, she did that and she hated it. You know, and she wanted to have her own business.
Gotcha.
And so that's where that come from. And she started off small. My mom's very opposed to being in debt, which Lord have mercy, that's passed on to me.
Yeah,
I mean, I can't do it.
Yeah.
You can ask Chuck. I mean, I just get in a sweat if I have to be in debt about something. But you know, she slowly built her business to what it is today.
Yeah.
And it's an awesome business for her. And it's a business that you don't think of a woman as being,
Yeah.
you know,
Can we say what it is? I mean,
yes, a fish bait and tackle store.
yeah, it's
You
an
know,
institution in Quitman,
yeah,
Georgia, right? How
yeah.
long has she been
That
there?
is a male dominated thing. That is not something a woman does,
Yeah.
but I mean, my mama has so much, gets a lot of respect from the male fishermen. Go talk to Miss George, she's very well respected because
Yeah.
she knows her stuff,
Yeah. Well, that,
and
yeah, well, that, and I think it's always amazed me about it is that she, will challenge people that come in and they still have relationships. How long has she had the bait store?
I know, uh, I can't remember like when it started, but she started off just with a tiny little box on the side of the house and people dropped their money in a little
Really?
box. But I
Really?
think she and a teenager actually built our first little tackle shop. I mean, she did it herself, poured the concrete. Her and that guy did the walls. I mean, my mama can do, you can't tell my mama she can't do stuff.
Right.
And my dad helped too, of course, because he was an electrician. But, when you think about who built that business, it's my mom. And I was probably like 9, 10 years old. So, it's running close to a 40, 50-year-old business.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it
So,
sounds like you got to witness all that, which to me, even though your mom's doing the kind of typical, traditional stuff in the house, she's also kind of venturing out and showing you that, hey, if you want to do something, you can.
and
But
always talking to me about you've got to get your education. You don't want to be stuck working in a factory. You don't want to, you don't sit here and, I mean, honestly, it's like, you're not here to wait on the man.
yeah,
She made me very independent with how she talked to me. Angie, you're smart. You can do better. Okay. Than just staying around here, just getting your high school diploma, which, that's what my parents got. And I mean, to be honest with you, with a lot of the people around here having a high school diploma, what is saying something back then.
yeah. Well, and back then I would say it's probably a big deal compared to
Yeah.
now, right?
Yeah, because I can think back to most of my friends, who I grew up with, because I mean, I didn't grow up in the fancy part of town,
Yeah.
And so the friends I had around my neighborhood, most of their parents were high school dropouts, divorced, a lot of alcohol abuse,
Yeah.
So I grew up seeing all that, but that wasn't part of my life.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
could stand back and I could watch all that.
Yeah.
And observe it and have those conversations with my mom. And she would talk to me, about it and about how, I, she didn't want me being a part of that.
Were you aware that you didn't live in the quote unquote right part of town? Like, did you feel that whole class thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I can think back to when I was in school. I was part of the gifted program back then. And
Yeah.
so
Now that's what you do too. You teach
and now
kids.
that's what I do.
Yeah,
I'm a
right. So,
gifted. That's like a goal. When I become a teacher, my whole goal was I want to be the gifted teacher
yeah.
one day because I want to work with kids like me. And, in my class, we had however many kids in that gifted class, 15, 16 kids. And, a lot of those kids, a lot of the white kids, some of the black kids, they would always be in the good teachers class
Yeah.
because, their parents made the call.
Yeah.
I want my child in this person's class,
Yeah.
da 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 da, or that's who they, but not my mama, and not from where kind of our social status in the community. I got put in the not so great classes,
Yeah.
but I mean, I'm thankful for that now because it's really I can get along with a lot of different people.
Yeah.
I can hold my own, and I mean, now I'm thankful
Yeah.
about it. But I remember I used to tell mom, I'd be like, can't you call the school and get me put in so-and-so's class? I can't stand being in this class. Blah, blah, blah. You know how kids can be. She'd be like, nope, that's where they put you. That's where you stay and learn to live with it.
Yeah.
And I learned to live with it.
Yeah. I remember in seventh, I guess maybe it was eighth grade, I got put in like gifted biology. Right. And so they moved me. And I remember walking into the class and number one, I felt really uncomfortable because I knew I wasn't affluent, and everybody in there was the kids from moneyed families. Right. And
Yeah.
it took about a week for me to realize they weren't any smarter than me. They were just rich.
Right.
I didn't last
Had
though.
better clothes and shoes.
Yeah,
They
well,
had all
yeah. When I think that's the other part for me, I grew up 2 blocks from the housing projects, which meant I was also too close to Black people, right, in the eyes of white folks,
yeah.
right? So, and that really didn't happen until middle school, or what we used to call junior high, that I realized that I really started thinking about class, because in elementary school, I was in a neighborhood school where everybody was pretty much the same. But it was middle school where I was like, holy cow. And then you start getting teased about your clothes or where you live or who you live close to.
Yeah.
And it was kind of brutal in a way. It certainly wasn't any fun. I think the deeper part of this, and I don't know if you ever felt this, I was talking about it with somebody the other day, that kind of lasted into high school. And I am ashamed to say that there were years where I was ashamed of my family. Like, I was ashamed of where we lived. And I was identifying with these folks who lived on the other side of town, right? That I wouldn't come home, bring home with, or bring home into my neighborhood. And just looking back, especially having parents that just work their fingers to the bone, this kind of game we can get into where, because we don't live in the right part of town or have the right stuff, that I was really ashamed of my family. And I'm ashamed to say that I was, but.
Well, I think that happens. And I kind of went the other way. Like once I got into high school, I ended up dropping out of gifted because I didn't associate. I
Yeah, me
couldn't relate
too.
to those kids.
Yeah.
They weren't my peers.
Yeah.
They didn't drink. They didn't go do things on the weekend like I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of broke away from them. And I hung around with people, who were more in my social standing. And like I said, a lot of my friends have parents who weren't as good as mine. It's kind of like I went the other way.
Yeah.
I would look at those kids. Well, first off, when I was growing up, I looked at those kids and thought that their parents were the coolest thing ever because they let their kids do all this stuff. and my parents were prudes and just didn't understand me. But, of course, now I look back and go, thank you.
Yeah.
But growing up when I was little, we had a single wide trailer. And as time went on and mom and dad saved more money, we added on. But still, where my mom lives, inside of basically the house she lives is still that single wide trailer.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's been remodeled and done. But I just love the fact that I can go in there and I can show you, like, now the hallway or the little back door when you walk in, and there's the kitchen counter and everything. That used to be my bedroom.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this little bitty, basically, I don't even know if it was a bedroom, but it was super tiny. I kind of look back on it now and I was like, dang, I didn't think we were poor back then. But now when I think about it, yeah, I guess we kind of were, because you don't know you're poor when you're poor.
Yeah. Well, my family never talked about money either.
No.
We were that's just the way it was. It wasn't really till I ran into other people who lived really differently that I could even make a comparison.
Right. Yeah. And that's what, I always thought that we had and we did have a good life. We had food, we didn't have to worry about bills or anything like that.
Yeah.
But, when I compare that to how other kids, I look at other kids' homes when I'd go to their house and I'm like, okay, I don't have all that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you're also pretty progressive on racial issues, pretty progressive when it comes to gay folks. Is that fair to say? Like,
yeah.
And I am. Do what?
I said compared to others.
Yeah. For me, and I don't know if this was the case for you, what I was told about different people just didn't match up to what I experienced with them. And in many ways, it kind of created this, well, that's not right, because these folks aren't acting like people are saying they're supposed to act. I mean, did you have that too, especially in a small town?
Uh, Give me an example.
Well, for example, the schools were still pretty segregated until I got to third grade. And I mean, this is how important this was because I can still remember it. In third grade, the first two Black kids that I ever encountered in public school were Wendell Lewis and Titus Coleman. And they played Little League with me. And I'd been taught a lot of things about Black folks, about their hair and all this stuff, right? And the three of us became friends. We were on the same Little League team and we would wrestle. And I just remember going, these are great guys. Like what's all this bullshit about, Black folks that I heard? I'm not saying you heard this at home, but in my home and my extended family and people my parents ran around with, you heard a lot of racist comments, right? But here were these two guys that were just beautiful kids. We had a good time, always nice to me. Our families were nice to me, and it really challenged. And I'd say the same thing when I've encountered gay folks later. It's happened when I've encountered women and all the stuff I was told women couldn't do. Like, it seems to me that over and over again, what I was taught to believe has been challenged by things I've experienced in the world. But really young, it started with the race piece. The gay thing was much later. Probably my 20s.
Yeah. Well, I can say, so I didn't experience segregation when I went to school. I never did go to kindergarten, but I could, like, first, second, third grades, I had strong, wonderful Black women teachers. I mean, they were pillars of this community, and I had them as teachers. And I was also in classes. I mean, of course, when you're a kid, you don't really even think about it, but I would say probably the majority of the kids in my class were Black and have always been more Black. I've always been in classes where I was the minority.
Yeah.
I can remember one time being in a class, and it was on South Court Street. It was the first day of school, and I'm sitting in this classroom, and somebody, there's a knock at the door, and I can remember this, and me being taken out of a class, and I'm hearing people talk, these adults saying, she can't be in there. She's the only white person in that class. We can't have her in there. And so they took me out and stuck me somewhere else. Wow. I mean, wow. So yeah. Well, things like that. And it's like, okay, so it's not right for me to be in here with all these people. I mean, what's happening? Yeah. But I mean, I was a kid. I didn't know to. Yeah. Was there another school at that time in Brooks County? Because it's a heavily Black county, right? So was there a private school, or were there Christian schools or anything? Yeah, there was. And it was Westbrook. And that was actually the first school I worked at after graduating college for 2 years, because it was the only job I could find. Wow. But it was a Christian private school. However, the school was created when desegregation began. So we all know what it was. Yeah. But well, I'm just thinking about why your classes, was there white folks that were going? I was at a city school. Yeah. Okay. So back then, at the time, every little city had its own little school. Yeah. Which is not really done anymore. So with me being in the city school, there was a higher population of Blacks. Now, there were some other schools that had higher populations of whites. And then there was one, I can remember I believe there was one little elementary school that was all, I think pretty much had a high population of Blacks. There were hardly any. Yeah. And then, of course, we had the private school too that was pulling some of the white population into it. Yeah, that happened here in a lot of places in the South when the feds forced desegregation. All of a sudden, these private schools and Christian schools popped up like mushrooms. Yeah. Right. And it was interesting because when you go back and do that history,
nobody would say it was about racism. They said it was about school choice.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's kind of, like before when I was talking about I'm a big proponent of choice, I guess I got to eat my words some because, I do have some issue with that. I really do.
Yeah.
I guess school choice would be something that I'd have to put in the I'm a hypocrite corner.
Well, no, I'm not accusing you of that. Like it's interesting that language stays the same over time, but has different motivations to me. And even now, a lot of kind of the Betsy DeVos stuff is, the fear I have is, are you going to underfund public schools if everybody flees that can, right? So it's one of those things,
right?
But well, can we talk a little bit about, because I mentioned this to you on the phone the other day, and I don't know if I've talked to Chuck about this a lot, because we've known each other forever, and I've always been a little bit of a freak, in South Georgia. And I've tried to kind of fit in, and I've done things that I regret to fit in and be a part of the local community. And I feel like I'm a part of the local community, but not in the traditional sense of the word. But one of the things we talked about the other day was just, even doing the podcast, right? I have tremendous fear about the things I say on this thing. And I think a lot of times we don't talk about the fact that we may live in a place where there's we're kind of programmed to censor. And I think we should always think about what we say and how it affects people, right? But there's so many things over the years that I haven't said because of the consequences, economically, employment wise, physical safety wise, and so forth. And particularly if you don't believe and go along with the party line. I mean, and I can't remember what you said, but I'm just wondering, have you been aware of that kind of growing up, that you felt like you couldn't say and do certain things because kind of the conservative pressure to conform?
I do try to watch what I say because, you are judged by your beliefs or, how you see the world and stuff. Well, she doesn't fit in. We don't need to, put her here. She might cause trouble. We don't, and, people don't like troublemakers because, and I fall into this category too. I like the easy life. I like things easy. I like to go enjoy my life and do things. And, I always thought growing up I was going to be a rage against the machine kind of person. But as I've gotten older, it's like, nah, I can't say I'm happy with the status quo, but I do watch what I say because I don't want to be pigeonholed as like some of the crap they say online about Democrats, how they view me, and which, like, most of my friends, associates, people who I work with, if you asked them, if you had to guess what Angie Tillman was, they'd say I was a Republican. I'm a conservative Republican because looking at me, that's what I look like. And I do. I don't voice my opinions a lot. I don't, stand up probably when I should, but I'm sitting here raging inside, I guess you could say. I do get to a point where I will break. And I've had that happen. I've had that happen in my mama's business. I've had that happen at work, at lunch, when you get a bunch of people together and they start talking politics. I'll sit there with my mouth shut for so long, then I go, enough. I gotta speak. And then everybody just, kind of shuts up and looks like Angie's talking. And then it's like, you see all the mouths drop because she's just, spilled a lot of shit that they didn't know about me.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the other thing. And I don't know if you encounter this. I encounter a lot of people on a regular basis, and I'm fascinated by how few people, I think a lot of people do, maybe I'm guilty of this too, assume that you believe what I believe.
Yes.
And
oh my God, yes. And I mean, I fell victim to that. I know being a teacher, I am a firm believer in, I'm not sharing my values with you. That's not my job.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm here for. I want you to have your own opinions. Keep me out of it, because kids ask me different things like during elections and stuff, and I'm like, no, I'm not sharing that with you. Well, why not? I'm like, because I'm your teacher, and hopefully you look up to me, and it's not my place to do that. In my opinion, I'm here to teach you the facts, and you make your own opinions, or teach you the history, blah, blah, blah. So one time we did, this is when I also did middle grades, gifted, and we did this presidential unit, and it was at the end of it. And I had this one student, and she classified herself Native American, poor family, not husband, but father on disability. I think the mom was unemployed. I mean, they had it rough. And that was a stepdad too. That wasn't her biological dad either. But when it was all over with, and I felt like we were really close, and I was like, surely she would be someone who would vote. I think this was the first election with President Obama. And so she was like, who did you vote for? Come on, you can tell me. She was just really trying to wear me down. And I was like, I'm not, and who did President Obama first run against?
It was McCain.
McCain, yeah.
Palin and McCain.
Yeah, that's it. As soon as you said that, it popped in my head. And I was like, well, who do you think? I mean, I've taught you for a few years now, because I have the kids, year after year. I'm like, so you kind of think you know me. Who do you think I voted for? And she's like, you voted for McCain, didn't you? And I was like, I was stunned. I'm like, but then I kind of went like, well, I guess I'm doing a good job not teaching my ideals, because they're just looking at the outside of me and making a judgment on me. And that was just a real eye-opening experience for me. And you just don't really know what is going inside anybody.
I think that's what we got to ask, and I'm not sure we always know what's going on inside ourselves either, not that it's always a guarantee. Speaking of 08, I remember my mom being in the hospital. This is just because I think a lot of people are going to listen to this, and they're not going to have lived in the Deep South and kind of know what it's like. But my mom was in the hospital, and a nurse came in to draw blood. And as she was sticking the needle in my mom's arm, she started complaining about Obama and said he needed to be killed. I'm not lying. And I'm thinking, should I say something now as the needle's in or out? And my mom, what's funny is my mom voted for Barack Obama in 2008. But and I encounter it now a lot too. There's actually, and I would say it's gotten worse with President Trump. There's a lot of folks that kind of want to force me out of the closet as a leftist. They feel you out to see who you voted for. And Chuck and I have talked about this. I've been amazed at the just rage if you don't answer, or if you don't give the answer people want.
Well, now if somebody comes out and asks me, I'm saying. I mean, I do, because I have had people come up. I'll never forget. It was this lady who, I've taught her kids. I mean, I consider her a friend. I still do. But it was kind of like, and this is something I think, we were kind of talking about addressing, is I really thought our friendship was like moving forward. You know what I mean? I mean, because as if any middle-aged women listening to this, you may realize it's hard to maintain friendship. Especially somebody like me who doesn't have kids, to have that bond to pull you in and stuff like that. So I really don't have a lot of friends. And so this lady, we had a lot of common interest, craft wise, sense of humor wise, that kind of stuff. And I really felt our friendship was moving forward. But then she got to talking about politics, and I was just kind of quiet. And then she was like, well, let me stop a second, Angie. Aren't you a Republican? And I was like, no, I'm not. I said, I'm kind of offended by everything you just said. I was like, but here, let me help you put this in the car and I'll see you later.
What happened after that?
I mean, if we see each other, we say, hey, but that's it.
Yeah.
And it's not because I'm not going to hang out with you because you're Republican, but if you have such hatred in your heart about some stuff like that, it's like, I really don't want to be around you.
Yeah. Do you feel like things have changed since President Trump was elected?
Oh my God, yes.
And can you talk about that? Because I just feel like what was already here really just came to the surface and was really emboldened in a way that it hasn't been since I was a kid, and George Wallace and these folks were running for office.
And I mean, that's the perfect word. People feel emboldened. Too many people feel emboldened to show that hate that they have, which I guess that hate was always inside of them. For what is just, I just don't understand it. It's like, I don't know, we're getting deep now, aren't we, Mark?
Well, and we don't, I mean, again.
but it's, why, where's all this hate coming from? Yeah. I mean, is it generational racism or is it more than that?
Yeah. I have my theories about it. I think it's always been there. I think we've seen, and I want to put myself in other folks' shoes to the degree I can, especially as a sociologist. But in 40 years, we've seen folks of color, non-white people move up. We saw a biracial president. We have seen people in the media more now. I think especially when white Southerners who are working class and poor see people that don't look like them doing better than them, that something must be wrong.
Yeah. There you go.
So what gets called racial progress in the last 30, 40 years, I think challenges a lot of our kind of white sense of how the world should be and where I should be in it. And of course, we're not going to get mad at systems that don't pay us well and jobs that go overseas. We got to find a group to point at as the problem. And that's not new, right? I think the roles of women have changed a lot, and people want to go back. Well, this is my thing with a lot of the Trump supporters in my life. And I'm going to keep saying this until someone can answer my questions. Like, I wanted to know when people thought America was great, like what was the date? Because if we're talking the 50s, I don't know any women in my life that want to go back to the 50s. I don't know any Black folks that want to go back to the 50s. I don't know any gay folks that want to go back in the 50s. So that question of when was it great and who was it great for is a really...
And, I was listening to some of your other podcasts and you asked that question before, and I kind of was like pondering about that. And I'm sure it just popped in my head because I was watching that documentary. But for a lot of people, the 80s were great. Yeah. For a lot of business people, the appearances of all that money, with the stock exchange being great and all that. And that's the thing that I can't get. It's like, okay, the 80s were great for people who had money and were affluent. That doesn't equate to it being great for you.
Yeah. Well, and we can say the same thing right now, right?
Yeah.
The stock market is breaking a record every other week. We're above 30,000 points, but the average person, the
people around here, the majority of the people around here don't have money in the stock market.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the new thing I'm hearing is that, well, a lot of people's retirement accounts are tied up in the stock market, which is a whole conversation itself, if they have any interest in stock, but the vast majority of Americans don't, right? So we have people waiting for food. We have people been furloughed from work. We have, and
people being evicted.
Yeah. And the South has always had a higher concentration of poverty. But, there's one other, to get back to your question of why Trump now and what came to the surface, like if you would have told me in 1980 that Bruce Jenner was going to become a woman, right? Again, I think people think normal is upside down in terms of where white people are, where men should be, who's a woman and who's not, where gay people, should be. So it's been a lot of social change, and it was really because of social movements that's happened in my lifetime and yours, right? It's dramatic. And then if we throw social media in there, um, there's a way, and I said this years ago about smartphones. There's a kind of segregation that's happened, and I don't know if you see it in classes because your students probably don't have phones, but in college classes, when I was in college, you would come in, there were a bunch of people that looked differently than you, and you would develop relationships and you'd do group projects together. But it was really informal, and people built relationships outside of the classroom. We would have beers together. For the last 10 years now, when I come into a classroom, or did, everybody was on their phone.
Yep.
So there's this way that the technology has encouraged us all to segregate more. And then the social media reinforces that, so we don't get outside of our comfort zone. We don't talk with people or interact with people that aren't like us, unless we have to. And kind of where we are, But back to the question about Trump. So you felt that too, that things have changed.
Oh yeah.
Kind of gotten worse.
And this is, talking with social media. I mean, I can't roll my eyes hard enough when I see people post like, the most beautiful first lady we've ever had, Melania Trump, and it's like so many of the Southern women. I mean, and I know I'm not saying all, but I've seen several, of my social media friends post stuff like that. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
God, I don't even know you.
Yeah.
Well,
and this is, you're right. And this is why I want to talk to folks.
Michelle Obama, because she wanted to bring nutrition in the school.
Yeah.
I don't know where people are coming from with this.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole point of this, one of the points of it. And I mentioned to you before we started that I've reached out to local Republican Facebook groups, and nobody's willing to talk with me, but I really want to better understand what's going on in the thinking of people when it comes to specifically folks that support Trump.
Without it feeling like an attack.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I hope that you have a way of approaching people like that, because anytime I try to approach somebody with those kind of questions, I feel like I'm attacking them.
Yeah.
Or I'm making them sound stupid.
Yeah.
Because you can, and I don't want anybody to feel that way, but I also don't know how to word it to where, why is this person, the leader in your eyes when the things that they have said and done, and I just
well, I really do that. Like, I've talked to a number of people, not on camera, and I've asked them, so has your life been better? Like, because I'm like, is that what it's really about? Because that's what some of the polls say about. And people will tell me, well, yeah, I've made more money in the last 4 years. And one of the things that's interesting, and my liberal friends got mad at me for this when I shared it, the US Census does show that poverty has gone down in the last 4 years and the median income has gone up. Now, whether we can attribute that to Trump or to the legacy of the Obama era, and I voted for Obama in 2008, but I'm very critical of him for a variety of reasons. But we're not sure if the improvement was, because of policies that Trump, created, or what happened before him. But most of the people I've talked to can't point to anything specific. Like, and I just wonder, especially here, if people like him because they either want to be like him, or he's given folks permission to and then we have the culture of political correctness, right? So he's kind of made it okay to say things that people really want to say, and because it's how they feel, and I don't know, and I can't find out because nobody will talk to me.
Yeah. And, and they like him because he's not a politician. He's a businessman. And I really think, and I know I said that from the get-go, I'm like, people want to vote him in because they think that he's going to make them rich. Even though when you look at things, the man's filed bankruptcy how many times and cheated how many people and da 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 da. but okay, you want to emulate him? All right. But, and as far as with the having more money and the poverty line increasing, you know, yeah, I'm making more money. The other things we have invested, yeah, they're making more money, but also I spend more money at the grocery store.
Yeah.
I may not spend as much money on gas, but different services cost a lot more.
Yeah. Healthcare's cost have gone up. Go up
Healthcare
right.
costs more, and I think it's going to be going up even more next year. You know, it's like, okay, there may be growth on that scale,
Yeah.
but it's being taken somewhere else.
Yeah.
So to me, you know, I don't know, when they talk about make America great again, I think it's just more of wanting to oppress the people who, like you say, are moving up, and they need, and you know, I personally embrace it. I think it's great. But I was trying to think, you know, before we were speaking and stuff, because I knew we were going to talk about different things. But as a Southern woman, a Southern white woman, first off, I can only think of two male bosses that I've had. The rest have all been women. And as far as principals and stuff like that, or when I used to be a hairdresser, of course, they were all, not of course, but they were women, business owners or managers. And then also with principals, I've worked under 3 Black women principals who were awesome, you know. So I could also sense from some people, who does she think she is?
Because
You know,
those
they'd
people
have
got
that.
those positions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, or I'm not going to listen to her, that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, why aren't you?
Yeah.
She's your principal. What is she asking you to do that's not, you know, anything you shouldn't be doing?
Yeah.
And I think some of it does go down to, I don't want to have to listen to a Black person tell me what to do.
Yeah.
But, you know, then you need to.
Yeah, I've reached out to the local Democratic Party too, and I'm not sure if they're going to talk with me or not, hopefully, but I guess one of the things that also scares me is that the Democrat folks don't seem to want to learn from Trump. Like, and what I mean by that is I talked to like lifelong Republicans before this last election, right? And I was and they're kind of your traditional Republican, probably like your dad was, right? Not big fans of Donald Trump. And so I was like, so Mr. So-and-so, like, what do you think is going to happen this next election? And I had 2 different older gentlemen in their 70s and 80s say, well, there's going to be a blue wave. Joe Biden is going to slam the country. He's going to sweep the country. It's going to be a landslide. And I was just like, I don't think so, you know? So, well, and I don't know how you feel about this. And I guess this is my question. Like, so many people I know, including family members, just thought there was going to be this, you know, landslide Joe Biden thing, when in fact Donald Trump got more votes this time than he did the last time. You know, and I asked him this on another podcast, like what does that mean? And I think the Democrats haven't realized that people are tired of politicians.
Yes.
I'm tired of politicians.
Yes, me too. I mean, which a lot of, you know, I didn't go out and canvass and ask people or really have conversations, but I can say a lot of the people who I work with, or not who I work with, but who I might associate with, they really thought Trump was going to win.
Yeah.
They were shocked.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
think folks still are.
And I mean, I felt, I was even shocked because I've been Democrat ever since I can remember. I've almost always voted blue. Every once in a while, like in a local election, I might vote Republican because I know that person. I really know, you know, or I don't know what I judge to be their values. Who knows anymore?
Yeah.
But you know, for as long as I can remember, I voted blue, and I'm just pumped that Georgia went blue. And I really hope, we go blue in the runoff election too, because I think it's time let's get some changes in there. Now, whether or not they're going to do the job, I have no idea. I don't really maybe agree with everything I've seen or heard, but I want to see what blue can do.
I guess have you been bombarded with the text messages, the phone calls, the mailers?
The mail. Yeah.
Like
I
think this is another
a room.
Folks outside of Georgia, let's just say you have no idea what's happening in this state right now. We're coming up on the 5th, right? This thing, you can't turn on the radio, YouTube without back to back commercials for either the Dems or the Republicans. And all it makes me think of how much damn money's being spent. I'm guessing, this sounds ridiculous, but $1 billion for this is over with. Billion with a B.
Oh, it's ridiculous. And that's kind of like, I early voted. Well, I did a mail-in ballot.
Shame on you.
I'm terrible. But I did a mail-in ballot way back when, and then I started getting inundated with all these mails and messages and stuff. And I'm sitting here doing the same thing. I'm like, look at all this money. What could y'all have done with this money besides doing that?
When I listen to a lot of conservative talk radio, and my thing is it's all day, all the time. And I'm just thinking, you've already got these voters. Like, what could that money you're spending to get people you've already gotten to get done? The other thing I was saying, I don't know if I ever told you and Chuck this, but the mail-in ballot thing, when I moved to Oregon, I was there 2 months. I got my driver's license, registered to vote. Election was coming up, and you can mail, they have mail-in ballots. They mail it to your house. You have a couple of weeks to turn it in. They send you a book with all the candidates, where they stand on. And I was like, where in the hell am I at? Like, it was literally like moving to another country. And there was never an issue of voter fraud. There was no discussion of that. It's amazing.
It is just the best thing to me. I'm like, I love this. I really do. You don't have to ask off work early to make sure you get there. None of that's going on, which, some people say they ought to get the vote. You ought to get the day of vote and the day off or whatever. But Lord, you'd still be in line for everyone to stand in line. If you want a democracy, let's make it easy to vote, which I know it's a privilege. People fought and died for it and all that, but come on, this is awesome. And to me, the whole voter fraud thing is kind of like when your favorite team, when you go watch a football team play football and they're not doing good, you start blaming the refs. When your team's not winning, you're going to start finding reasons to justify.
I'd add to your story, and I'd say, and then the ref that you're blaming gets on the microphone and says, "Hey, but I'm on your side," and you still blame the ref.
I know.
That's the thing that's amazed me, is that, and it terrifies me because I know about totalitarianism, human conformity, that if Republicans don't say the right thing, who have said there's been no systematic voter fraud, all of a sudden they're getting thrown under the bus. Brian Kemp is not going to get reelected in Georgia. It's over for him. I got news. He will not get reelected because he hasn't gone along with Rudolph Giuliani and and this whole effort.
When's his reelection?
I don't know, to tell you the truth. I don't remember what cycle he's on, but the folks on conservative talk radio are just throwing him under the bus.
So how do you think he's doing as governor?
Oh, well, right now he has bodyguards for his family. The Secretary of State, same thing. They've all had multiple death threats from his voters. From people who voted for him, not, so.
See, and that's, because when he won, I mean, I was disappointed, but since he's been in there, I'm like, you know, he's not tragic. He's not, I
Yeah.
mean, it's not, which I
What?
mean, I'm a teacher. He gave us a raise. So I'm kind of like,
Yeah.
I might
Yeah.
like this guy a little bit,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I
So,
also wonder if he hasn't. I mean, a lot of people argue he was guilty of voter suppression with Stacey Abrams, right? That's her argument. You know, what went down in Quitman, he was the Secretary of State, you know, arrested all those folks for mail-in or
oh,
for,
really?
oh yeah, he was the Secretary of State. They were
See,
all
that's how I pay attention.
they were all arrested. No charges were ever found to be true. They were
Yeah,
humiliated. So he's had firsthand involvement with the issue
with that.
of voter fraud accusations.
Oh, see, I didn't even,
Um, yeah, he was Secretary of State when all that went down, and he's, from my understanding, the one that sicked the GBI on people in Brooks County.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So
The only thing I knew about him beforehand was he was the professional standards commissioner.
gotcha. Yeah.
Because when I
moving up.
renewed my cosmetology license, his name was on the license.
Yeah.
That's all I knew about. And that's how much I pay attention.
Yeah.
I'm not as good as I should be.
Well, there's too much to pay attention to at
Yeah.
some point, especially if you're working full-time jobs and, you know, have family and lives and all that.
Going to school all the time.
Yeah.
But
So when you think of the like future, like how are you feeling?
well, I'm a perpetual Pollyanna. I had a professor tell me that one time.
Perpetual Pollyanna.
I was
I'm
like,
gonna start
really?
calling you that.
I'm like, you go look up Pollyanna. I don't know what Pollyanna is. I'm like going, what's that? You know, she had to tell me what a Pollyanna was, you know, and I've had friends tell me, take off your rose colored glasses, Angie. You know, I mean,
I don't think that's fair knowing you though, because I think you critically think and you ask hard questions and you ask sometimes dangerous questions.
but sometimes I don't feel like it's dangerous enough. I feel like I could do more. I really do. But I just, you know,
When I say dangerous, I mean questions that people avoid. That's all I mean.
Yeah. And I mean, I do try to question, and I do try to, like, if I'm not sure about something, I will go research it. If I do see a post or something that I'm like, what? I will go research it and go find the facts out for myself.
Yeah.
But now, do I share that fact with the person who posted it? Not all the time. I will sometimes, but not all the time. But going back to your question, I mean, I think it's going to be okay. I think things are going to work out because even though, you know, bad things happen as a human society as a whole, we do pull together when it's time to do so. And I hope I'm right.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I hate that it always seems to be a tragedy or something that pulls us together.
Yeah.
But I think as a country, we get pissed off at each other and we go in our corners and want to stay there. But in the end, we know that's not the best. And I think you're always going to have the fringe, but collectively, us as a whole, I think we're going to do maybe what's not right, but we're going to do what we can to keep the status quo.
Yeah. Well, can we're like an hour and 38 in, but I got two other questions. So I don't know if you need to go or anything, but I got two questions for you. Can I change gears a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you consider yourself a feminist?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I got just as much rights as any man. I'm not going to bow down to a man.
Yeah. Well, that's not a word I hear in the South much unless you're on a college campus is why I ask.
I mean, I'm as a teacher, now that's one thing. It's like girls can do it just as good as the guys can in anything they want to do. Yeah,
Gotcha.
I'm definitely a feminist.
Okay.
Always, and I think, uh, you know, yeah.
Yeah. So
I think that's why some people might not like me sometimes. Some
what?
men might not like me.
Yeah. Well, I think my mom would never use the F word, feminist, but my mom was a feminist to the core. My mom and I used to struggle, and I had to keep reminding her, look, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and all this stuff I'm doing, you taught me by how you lived and the morals and values you taught me. So, but she was such a feminist, but that word, I think, carries so much baggage with it, especially for her generation,
Yeah. Well, and I mean, a lot of times in the images that they saw back then with the feminism, especially older women, they equated it to being, you know, loose, cheap, sleeping around, doing things like that. And that was against their entire being, things like that, but yeah, there's no man better than any woman.
Gotcha. So my other question was, and I also want to make room for you to ask me anything if there's something that's kind of bubbled up. But what do you think about this whole little attempt at doing this podcast, trying to get folks to talk with me? I mean, because I said this in this little introductory one. It was tough growing up here because there weren't adults saying, at least I didn't have them. Occasionally teachers. I mean, teachers saved my life, literally, especially in high school. I had an art teacher who, at my worst, when my family was tearing itself apart, she just loved me and talked me out of quitting school. She just loved me. So I had those people, and it was really in school where, people showed me love and told me was capable and the rest. But in terms of the public, I would have loved to seen somebody say something different than what I was hearing sometimes, so that's kind of the motivation behind this thing. But as someone from this area, like, do you think conservative folks will ever talk to me? Do you think it's a futile kind of endeavor? Like, I'm just wondering.
That's a good question. I mean, like, I know with myself, I came here, said that I'd be happy to be on the podcast because I love you, and I
love
really
you
admire
too.
what you're trying to do, and you're doing it from the goodness of your heart. And I think the people who say no, either they don't see you as coming from your heart, or they're not coming from their heart with it. Like I said before, they got their own agenda with things that they want to do. A lot of these people with podcasts or, these talk pieces and stuff, they're doing it for their own personal gain. They're not doing it for the betterment of society or to learn from one another. It's kind of like that thing. What is a type of person who they don't listen to listen, they listen to respond, and I think a lot of, people fall in that category. And I mean, I think you just need to ask more people.
Yeah.
You got to, when you go fishing, you don't catch something every cast, or when you throw that net out, you don't always catch something. So keep throwing that net and you're going to get what you want eventually.
Something. Yeah, and there's a part of it is selfish. Like, some of this is just that kind of, we're coming full circle. I have found being silent kind of makes me sick after a while. Like, I've been in a situation recently where I've just had to hear things about women, about immigrants, about Trump that I thought, what reminds me of middle school. Number one, these are grown ass men.
Yeah.
But I just got to a point where it's like, okay, and I don't go to that place to talk politics, but it's, since everybody assumes that everybody believes the same thing. This is also just about me maintaining my sanity.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do. I mean, like I said before, I'm not out there marching, protesting, or I'm not volunteering time to the Democratic Party or anything like that.
Yeah.
But now when I do hear, you know, racial remarks or anything like that, oh, Angie, what is it? One of my friends, she's like, don't tell it like it is. Tillman get hold of you. You know?
I have no doubt about that.
Gonna rip you a new one. I mean, you get me fired up, but it's not something I want to be public about.
Yeah,
you know, because one thing is being a teacher. You know, we are held to a higher standard.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't want to put myself in a situation where, well, we don't need to have her doing this because of all her activities here, because I'm where I need to be. I'm in that classroom with my kids, you know, teaching them to think for themselves, not how I think.
Yeah.
And I don't really want them to know how I think.
Yeah.
But I think or what I value in that sense, political sense. Because I don't think first off, is, you know, it's not their business. And like I said before, I don't want to influence them. But, you know, I think you just need to keep on keeping on. And I mean, how long have you been doing this?
Just a couple of weeks, but I've been reaching out for about a month and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll continue to reach out regardless. I just wonder about, like, is the polarization so bad? You know, and I guess the other part of it that's frustrating to me is when I listen to conservatives and I listen to talk radio and they're saying things, they feel personal because I know they're talking about me and they're talking about people I love, as if we're immoral, as if we're communist, as, you know, and after a while it just gets a little weary, you know. And so when we talk with one another, instead of you talking about me, because I don't want to make accusations of, you know, about the other side if we're not, you know, I don't know you, you know. Right. I think it's that. And the other thing that scares me is I'm more than my politics.
Exactly.
You know,
and I think we need to remember.
Yeah, like I'm much more complicated than that. And so are you going to, and this is what scares me about our culture. I fear that we throw people away for some small slither of who they are, what they believe. We've certainly done it to gay folks. We've certainly done it.
Yeah, I was about to say, like someone's sexuality. Yeah, that's just like, one part of who they are.
Yeah. Well, and that's when we look back in history, that tendency has led to some really ugly situations. You know?
Yes.
So the kind of the ability to dehumanize, and the liberals do it to the right too, like at times. Instead of understanding why folks voted for Trump or why folks are frustrated or why folks are conservative, even people in my field that argue, look, our goal is to understand why people are the way they are, and not only that, why they are the way they are, shaped by their family, shaped by culture, shaped by their lived experience. They just don't come out of their mom hateful, homeless, whatever their situation might be. And so liberals in my life, and even sociologists, are often who tend to be liberal, tend to demonize conservatives in a way that I think is utterly unfair, as well as a violation of our own kind of analysis and lens that we see the world through. So anyway, is there anything that we should talk about before we sign off? Or
I mean, you had asked me about what I felt the future held, and I saw it in a positive light. What light do you see?
I'm not as positive. If I'm honest, I think big civilizations, and I think we're an empire because we have 700 military installations across the globe at least. I think empires, if you look at the Romans, Persians, Ottomans, we're kind of one of those things, and they have a life cycle. And I hope I'm wrong about all this, but I think there are a variety of factors that are all happening at the same time that will probably tear the country apart. Again, I hope I'm wrong, and it's a conversation I want to have with folks on this issue of social unraveling, because societies do come and go. You
Mhm.
know, there used to be
Well,
remember there used to be a Soviet Union. I'm watching a lot of stuff right now on what happened in Yugoslavia, and we're going through some of the similar processes. You know, this kind of group of countries who were a larger country at one point. They were actually states, and you had some of the same dynamics. Um, so that's my fear. And then we haven't even talked about things like climate change on top of that. Right.
uh, yeah.
Right. And maybe we can talk about climate change at some point, because you've done a lot of teaching in biology, taught a lot about the environment too.
Mhm.
But
Well,
that's
and
kind of where I'm at.
yeah. Well, and then of course I go straight to the positive side. Well, if it does tears apart, what can it come back together as being? I
Yeah.
mean, it could come back and be something even better. Hopefully not Russia, you
Yeah,
know.
well, well, I mean, I think, you know, societies restructure all the time, and the Soviet Union went through that process. Yugoslavia did. I'm not saying everybody's going to disappear. Again, I really don't know, but I just know I've got like 10 factors that I think they're really hard to overcome. You know, the demographic changes, the fact that white people are shrinking as a group, right? Because we're just not having kids. You know, a lot of us aren't married later in life. In fact, last I looked, there are more single people now than ever in the history of the country. You know, so people are going back to your issue, making a lot of choices. A lot of people didn't want to get married. They don't want to do the traditional thing. But so minority groups are growing. And I think as a country really set up for and by white men who had property, we're still struggling with that. And as you said, whether it's a white teacher who's got a problem with a black principal, right? Or half the country who thinks a democratically elected black man is Nigerian and a socialist.
Mhm.
You know, that's, to me, that was a vote that this isn't the way it's supposed to be. That is the White House, right? So that process is going to continue to change. And a lot of us would argue that's why you make voting difficult. That's why you gerrymander districts. That's why you have voter right. And this is only like Oregon's a white state. They're not
Yeah.
worried about black people voting, so they can be all progressive. You know, we're just honest about our stuff here. So I would argue we've got millions of black folks that can vote, and Republicans who are predominantly white don't want that to happen. You know, so that demographic change will continue to happen. That's one big one. I think the other, the gap between the rich and the poor has been growing for 40 years. You know, we're also not a nation of citizens, I would argue, and this really changed probably in our parents' lives. I would argue we're a nation of consumers. You know,
Oh God.
so
Yeah.
you know, and why I think that's important is that I've had people, you know, lecture me about the importance of voting and blah blah blah, and I'm critical of voting at times, especially on the federal level, because I'm tired of politicians who make careers, you know, using our
Mhm.
money to do it. But people who generally defend voting can't explain to me the voting system, you know, and I always have conversations. Well, so you're defending a system you really don't understand. Like, so what does it mean to defend systems we don't understand? Is there a possibility that the system, like, we don't have a popular vote, we have an electoral college?
Yeah.
And do you know the history of the electoral college and how that goes all the way back to slavery? You know, so we have, you know, most Americans, this is a kicker for me. Last time I taught at a community college down in Tallahassee, I asked grown people now, not 18 and 19-year-olds. Most folks were in their 20s and 20 on up, who the governor of Florida was. And 2 people out of 60 knew.
Well, I
Like,
mean, everybody's checked out from it.
yeah, so we have, right?
Did you see the thing where some person who was elected, I don't know, a House of Representative or something, they asked him what were the 3 parts of the government or something,
Yeah,
and he
3
couldn't say.
branches.
Yeah, the 3 branches. Yeah, see, I can't
Yeah.
even think.
Well,
But
yeah. When,
you
and I
know,
would argue the powerful who really kind of run things do not want an educated, informed citizenry.
well, I
Right.
mean, no, neither did the plantation owners.
Exactly. You can
You know, are
manipulate.
we their slaves?
Right.
Mm.
This is my liberal friends who kept complaining about Trump. And I would say this to Republicans too. Hey, if you don't like the government, don't fund it. Don't pay your taxes. It's just that they're using our money. We pay for this, right? So, the demographic thing, the wealth and income inequality thing, the fact that most Americans are not politically kind of educated, and I'm not saying I'm somebody who is, right? But
You are. You
not
make it a point to be, but you make
not
it
to
a
the
point.
degree I should be, but that's part of kind of why I'm on the left. I know enough about the history and the system that it's interesting to see people on the right start losing faith in institutions that I lost faith in a long time ago. We actually have some commonality, I would argue. So there's probably 5 or 6 other big things that I don't know how we will and I could boil it down to a simple question. How do we mend this? Trump's base is not going away. They all have been radicalized, right? We had all these attorney generals try to go to the Supreme Court to overturn an election 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. And now there's that guy trying to do something. What's his name?
Oh, well, there's several. They're
Well, the
trying
guy
to pressure
you
Pence into doing something, and yeah,
and they
there's
say he's going to be a 2024 candidate.
yeah. So, not to get too far in the weeds on this, I just, as a social scientist, am concerned that we may be going through kind of internal decline, and societies can devour themselves from within, and they can be devoured from without, and sometimes both those things happen. You know, um, it's troubling, and I hope I'm totally wrong, and I hope you're right. Um, it just seems to me that one last thing, and I'll shut up after this. I can't believe we're still talking about women's bodies and women having a right to their body. You know what I mean? Like, if we've had real change, why are we going back to that conversation? Right. So I think that's the other thing that I challenge a lot of my liberal friends around. Like, how are we measuring progress here? And if we're having to revisit some things, did we make progress?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I think a lot of that comes into, I mean, and I could be wrong, but the religious sector have seen a growth in politics, having a say in politics. And
that's in our lifetime too. It wasn't that way
yeah,
40 years
you
ago.
know, but it didn't seem as, I guess it's always been, but just so much. Well, what was it? I think in the 80s and stuff, it was pretty predominant in politics,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
certainly with Reagan, right? Who was, again,
Reagan.
loved by evangelicals. I would say that's where it really started, the moral majority. That when I would go to church, I don't know if your family went to church much, but the preacher, when I was a kid, never talked about politics. And if you were a nonprofit religious organization, you couldn't, right? He might hint at it, but Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell, and those guys back in the 80s, my understanding, they realized, oh no, we need to be political, and they really want a theocracy, not a democracy, I would argue.
Right. But I think Trump allowed more of a base there because he knew that's where he could get votes from.
Yeah.
So he gave them more of a voice, in which, of course, they do tend to turn toward women's rights because, with some of that, they just want to dominate,
in terms of pro-life, or yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean, I've just always been, it's a woman's choice.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk to folks because I don't think people who call themselves pro-life are really pro-life. I
Yeah.
mean, you want to talk about this for a minute?
Uh, we can. I'm
Okay.
sitting here thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, yeah. I don't know, Mark. I think some of the people who I know are pro-life, which is the majority of the people I know are
Yeah.
pro-life. You know, I mean, they see that as a life. And
I'm not debating that.
yeah, but I do.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as
Yeah.
it's just as far as
Cells.
it sells, you know, when during that time period, you know, of coming from a zygote into all those different stages, I mean, that this
We
organism
we have a tail.
cannot
Yeah.
survive on its own.
Yeah.
And it could have been created in a way that you have no right in saying that this woman should carry to term.
Yeah.
You know, it's not our business.
Yeah.
You know, we have the scientific ability or the medical ability to safely terminate this pregnancy that can give this woman her life back, you know. And the thing about it is, you know, it's safe. It's not even what the numbers have dropped dramatically. I mean, it's almost like I don't get why are you still arguing about it when it's not even as used as much as it used to be.
Yeah.
You know, the times it's used is because a lot of times it's a tragedy.
Yeah.
And so you have to, I don't know, put your foot down, you
Yeah.
know, on this. I don't get it. I know myself when as a teenager, young adult, whatever, you know, with friends and everything. I mean, and I've had friends who've had to have abortions. And, you know, it was hard. It's a hard decision to make. But inevitably it was made because they had a vision of their life that a baby would have ruined.
Yeah.
Because they weren't going to give it up for adoption, you know, and they would have ended up probably living in poverty or whatever. And these women, or, you know, these now women that did go through this, you know, they're productive citizens.
Yeah.
And one of them's against it now.
Yeah.
But you know what? I mean, where would you be if you hadn't had that choice?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Can I?
I'm thankful I never had to make that. It's a tough decision to make.
No doubt. Like, well, and this is, can I tell you why I don't think they're pro-life?
Why?
Many reasons. I think it's ironic. And again, this is one of the conversations I want to have with folks. I'm kind of spilling the beans a little early. Number one, Republicans always harp on small government. I think Raphael Warnock might have made this point in a debate. What makes, I mean, you want a big government, let government say what people can do with their bodies. Number one. Number two, we could get into the biologies. I agree with you. These are cells, you know, different stages, so forth, you know. But when you look at the data on most pro-life people, they're pro-capital punishment. So they're all about killing lives at times.
Oh, yeah. They don't care about it once it gets here.
No, they are not pro-social programs that make sure fetuses that develop into children, babies, that someone has to carry to term and go through that process, right? They're not concerned about anything past that fetus developing. They're not worried about those children, whether they have food, whether they're in a loving home. They're not going to pay for any social programs. They don't want to be taxed for anything. So how exactly is that pro-life?
Yeah.
You know, they're not pro-life when it comes to war. Tend to be very militaristic, war hawkish, right? Well, cheer wars on that they couldn't find on a map.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In countries you couldn't find on a map, right? So, and I've got a longer list than this, but And also these are evangelicals that you know, the Apostle Paul, was a murderer of Christians, right? And he has a conversion experience and becomes an apostle. Like this, I mean, it's very clear to me they're selective about how they define life, right? And who gets to live and who gets to die. You know, so I don't think they're pro-life. We won't even get into nature and life and nature, whether how we raise food, how we treat the planet, that's life too.
Yeah.
It's the thing that sustains us. But most of those folks feel like we should dominate it and do whatever we want to with it, because, you know, they think God's going to come back and pluck them out, you know,
Yeah.
when things get bad enough, right, in the rapture or something. So I don't think folks are, I think pro-life is kind of virtue signaling. It's that we're the people that are really down with life. And last thing I'll say, the women I know who've had abortions, same reasons. And the question I have about the trauma that comes with it, because it never was an easy decision. I know women in their 50s still feeling guilty, right? That all the rhetoric and narratives that the conservatives have created around having a choice, I think that's traumatic, that you're a baby killer. Now, again, don't ask me to fund anything. Don't ask, you know, but
Yeah.
you're a bad person. So it seems to me, and it's a question I'd love to hear people talk about. The decision in the folks I know was never an easy one, but I think most of the trauma comes around from the bullshit around the decision, the bullshit you get from family and friends who, again, don't want any responsibility, right? Who want to demonize women. And it's also linked to sex too, right? So you had sex, especially if you had sex out of the, you know, bounds of marriage, that adds to it. So I just think it's disingenuous on the part of conservatives to claim this pro-life mantle when there's plenty of examples of they are not pro-life, you know.
Those are good points. Yeah. And yeah, I see that.
But I'd love to know how they make sense out of it, you know.
Well,
And I say
I'm
that as somebody who was
sure we can
adopted.
find you some people to talk about that.
Yeah, well, you know, I was adopted, you know. People would make the argument, well, you know, you would have never been born. Well, that's true. I wouldn't have known, you know.
Exactly.
But it, and I also wonder if it were men, would it be different? You know, I just think it's patriarchy, that people feel the need to tell women what they can and can't do ultimately.
But I know, I mean, there's just a lot of, you know, women that I know. And I mean, women who I find to be strong, intelligent women, they are pro-life all the way. They're religious,
Yeah.
you know, and I don't know, you gave me something to think about with that, with those questions and stuff. But then I do know some conservatives who are pro-choice. I mean, they're for abortion, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, their argument is, you know, having unwanted pregnancies is a drain, you know, can be a drain on society. You know, they're more conservative because of the pocketbook.
Yeah, the physical, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah, you know, they like the conservative party because it's good for their bank account.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't know, Mark, giving us a lot to think about.
Anyway, I didn't mean to dive off into the abortion question.
It's just, I mean, I've always been pro-choice.
Yeah.
Always.
Well, and my question is,
and I mean, I hate to interrupt. I'm someone, I mean, I just be upfront and honest because I'm not like secretive about it. I was never able to have kids, you know, so having a baby is very, you know, or not being able to have a baby, you know, I went through some trauma with that and dealt with that on my own way. So, you know, I would have loved to have had a baby. And I mean, maybe, and would never even think about having an abortion, knowing, you know, what I know now, but it's still, we cannot judge a person because we haven't lived in their shoes. We don't know what they're going through. So let's stop trying to dictate it. anyway, but what were you going to say?
No, you put it well. Yeah. Anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay.
I hope I hadn't rambled on too long.
No, this has been what I knew this would be great. Like, we don't get to talk enough about these things, you know. And I have felt so alone here so many times. And it's one of the reasons people flee these places. You know, like I've left and come back and left and come back. And this time I'm not leaving. They'll just go and put me in the ground. But folks run folks off. And the folks that stay, I think there is a consequence emotionally, psychologically, physically, spiritually, for folks not to get to be who they are, for not, you know, it's like we're invisible, you know, if you're not like everybody else here. So I just appreciate you having this conversation with me today, because I love you. Man, you're one of my sheroes. You're a badass. You, as my mama said, you kick ass and take names. You know, and it's, you know.
Well, and I appreciate having somebody here, you know, to talk to that's, you know, because I understand the loneliness, and I understand, you know, not having a tribe.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and always feeling like you need to hold back because of certain reasons. It's nice to get together and be able to hash it out and talk about it. And I think you just need to keep plugging on, and I think it's going to come together.
Yeah. Either way, I feel better. Like I just feel better. And
me too.
Yeah.
After doing this, because I was a little nervous. I'm like, oh Lord mercy, what's going to happen? But you know, I do feel better. It's nice to you know, put it out there with your thoughts and values and beliefs, to not hold it in. But and I think it has, you know, you've made it comfortable for me to do that, and I think that's what, you know, just keep on doing that, making people comfortable with sharing their values and stuff. Well, and I think as we can listen to each other without thinking about the response and just really listen, maybe we can see that, you know, we can work things out, and it doesn't have to be so divisive.
Yeah. Well, we can disagree. Like, that's, you know, I think that's the thing. And it seems to me that that's what democracy is about. Like,
that's what it should be about. But now it seems to be about the bottom dollar, or advancing. You know, we've got these politicians, like you say, been in there for life or whatever. And it's not, to me, it's not about compromise and bettering the nation. It's about making yourself look good, padding your own pocket, doing, you know,
power.
It's so far from what people, it's so far from this angelic thing you get taught in elementary school about the government. It's nothing like that. And who's to say it's ever been like that?
Yeah, I would say it hasn't. That's a whole nother conversation. But
all right.
Well, thank you, Angie. Hold on, and we'll chat before. I'm going to turn the recording off, but I love you. Thank you.
I love you too.
I'm so glad you and Chuck are in my life. You know,
and we're glad you're in our life. Stay. Don't move.
I'm not going anywhere. Okay, hold on just a second. Okay.